When I was playing in my band, those guys gave me my first drug. The Animals. They gave me, what do they call them? Yellow Jackets, I guess. Anyway, I'm Pat O'Brien. I'm Pat O'Brien. Welcome to KLEAN Radio for this Sunday night. Andrew Spanswick is somewhere on a cruise. I have no idea where he is, nor should we reveal his. Well, I actually do know where he is. But he's on a boat, and he's not here this week. Last week we had a great trip to Portland, even though we couldn't get a taxi and Uber is illegal there. But we got ourselves around, and it was a good time. Met all our friends up there and saw a couple of treatment centers, and it was a good time. So in his place tonight, an old friend of mine, Dr. Jason Giles. Hello, Doc. How are you?
Hey, nice to see you, Pat. How are you?
Is there a Jay Giles joke there for you?
I've never heard that before. No one's ever said
that's
that.
like me with Pat O'Brien. Yeah, I saw you can do Rockney. And Adi Jaffee. Adi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Turn Adi's mic on. We'll be better. We on?
Am I
Okay, now we're
on?
good.
All right.
How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So we have a doctor, and that's Jason, and we have a .edu doctor.
PhD.
Well, that's education doctor.
So, Doctor of Philosophy, right?
You're in addiction medicine, right? He is, Jason.
Yeah, he's in addiction medicine. No, I'm a behavioral neuroscientist and
Okay.
quantitative psychologist by training.
Two different views on how to recover from both these guys. Let's get the numbers out to you, though. 800 is our number, 1-800-222-5222. Pretend you're calling a New York taxi. That'd be 800-222-5222. Give us a call. We'll take your calls. I'll work the calls tonight. Dr. Giles, Jason, your story is so interesting to me because you were a doctor not only in recovery, but had to go to recovery.
That's absolutely right. Yes, I kind of tripped and fell into this as an area of interest and as a specialty. I kind of had to. I had to learn about my own problem, something that snuck up on me. I didn't realize that I had trouble until I was deep in.
Define trouble.
Well, you know, there's a long history of alcoholism in my family. It goes back my dad and his dad and far back as anybody knows. We didn't call it that back then. There were, you know, they like to relax, and I like to relax also. And I found myself in academia and college and then medical training, and it's pretty tough. You know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort, a lot of learning, and a lot of intensity. And then in the later stages, it's dealing literally with life and death. And I began to look forward to the break, to the time off, to the weekend, to the time after training. And my training is in anesthesiology. That's my background. And so
That's where the good drugs are.
Exactly. So with little knowledge being a dangerous thing, I started to cross-reference my feelings with what was in the drawer.
Right.
And experimental neuropsychology, I think, is a qualification of mine too.
How common do you think that is?
Well,
in your profession,
the pieces of it, the feeling overwhelmed and feeling stressed and not knowing where to turn, I think that's a dime a dozen. I think that that's not unique to physicians. It's anybody in any kind of high stress position, like working at home is another thing where people might want to take a break. Doing something about it that's temporarily relief, but ultimately self-destructive. I think that's pretty common also.
Yeah.
So physicians are not immune. They're about the same as plumbers or bricklayers or police or anyone else. It's there's probably a 20% lifetime prevalence. There's probably somewhere between 5 and 10% point prevalence. So today, somewhere around 5 to 10% of physicians are having trouble. So I'm not unique in that way. There's nothing terribly unusual about a person seeking chemical relief from problems of life.
But you're unique in that you identified the problem and did something about it.
I got very fortunate, that there were, by the time I was there were 5 bullets in the roulette chamber, and I got very lucky to come on an empty one, and I had a lot of help. I had some sort of like your story. I got the right people and was very fortunate. And honestly, I was very fortunate, and I guess still am very fortunate, to be a physician, because in the day there's a special program for us, and in exchange for doing certain things, I got to continue to be a doctor.
It's amazing that we have a radio show. There's 3 of us who are drug addicts and alcoholics on the same show. Addy, you had SWAT teams at your door, right?
I did, yeah. I didn't get quite as long as my academic career before everything got bad in my life. I started using meth when I was in school. I had a long career of marijuana use and alcohol beforehand, but I got into the harder drugs when I was at UCLA. Started out with studying, and then it became a daily thing.
Now you worked there.
Yeah. Now I teach there. It's been a full circle. And when I got out of college, I just took on the job of drug dealing full time. It was pretty lucrative, and it let me use all the time, which was nice. It's pretty much all I was looking for at the time.
And it was meth, right?
Meth was my drug of choice. I was smoking it, and yeah, about 3 years into it, got into a motorcycle accident, got found with a bunch of drugs, and eventually they knocked down my door, and I had to pay the piper.
Really, a SWAT team?
Yeah, actually a Beverly
That's
Hills.
exciting.
It was, it was less exciting when the shotguns were pointing at your face, but it makes for a good story nowadays. I was at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, which is normally a time when I was passed out, and they apparently knocked on my door, but I couldn't hear it, and the landlord let them in, and next thing I know, there's a Scarface poster behind me, and shotgun pointed at my face. It was a quintessential, most cliched way of being arrested in Los Angeles.
And mine was alcohol, and my last day I drank 14 or 15 bottles of it in one day. Almost died, and that was it. And the party was over. Now I'm up to about 7 years. I say about, coming up on 7 years of sobriety. But the reason that we have two different doctors here, and actually I have I'm an honorary doctor. Can I be called doctor tonight?
Of course, Dr. Pat O'Brien.
Yeah, would you call me doctor?
I just did.
Okay.
Hey,
Making a house call, Pat O'Brien. Did many of those. But to be honest with you, let's talk about because you both bring an ocean of knowledge to this conversation about recovery. And I think you have different approaches to it. Now, Dr. Jaffee, I know you are, what are you? You're like holistic, you're into harm reduction, but you're not into total abstinence.
I think there are nearly endless roads to what we call recovery, and I'm not necessarily a proponent of one or another. I define what I do as helping people with problems resolve those issues in their life in whatever form that takes.
And whatever form does it take? I mean, well, first of all, does it work?
Yeah, sure, yes. The answer, the quick answer is yes, it works. People come to Alternatives, which is the treatment center I run right here by Beverly Hills, because they're sick and tired of whatever's going on in their life, and they feel like they want a change. But most of the people that come to us come there because they don't want the sort of change that other people are offering, and they like what we offer a little bit more. And yeah, I think it does a great job.
But Dr. Jaffee, realistically, after a brief conversation, most people who come to you are coming because of drug and alcohol problems. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I would say about 80 to 90 primary substance use is either alcohol or drug, and I'll even take that a little bit further. Probably for 70 to 80% of our clients, alcohol is their primary drug of choice.
Yeah, well, actually I was reading an article today that treatment admissions are now matched alcohol and opiates nationwide. People are coming in for these high-dose prescription opiates.
Yeah,
but let me ask you a question about
we talk a little bit more, I'll tell you why I think the treatment,
why it's on the rise.
Why the treatment admissions are what they are. I don't think it's necessarily a picture of what's happening on the street in terms of drug use. I think it has something to do with the solutions that we offer.
So let's say it's me, and I'm coming to your facility, and I want to explore my options. Most of what we hear, at least most of what I hear in the field, and also I think it's fairly common knowledge, I think, that if you got a problem, the solution is to stop. Right? If the problem is with drugs and alcohol, then Nancy Reagan, right? She said, just say no.
Just say no.
Just say no. So how do you reconcile that? How do you deal with somebody when you say, we're saying just say maybe or just say not so much?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll start with the notion that the just say no approach has done any good for any of us. I don't think it worked as a preventative measure. I don't think it's definitely not the cure-all from the treatment point of view. So I'll take it this way. Before I started Alternatives, I was a researcher at UCLA at the Integrated Substance Abuse Program, which is a satellite of UCLA that does addiction research. Great researchers there. And one of the things that I was looking at is barriers to treatment entry. Why don't people come into treatment? Because one of the issues that we deal with in addiction is that if about 24 to 30 million people suffer from it on an annual basis, and yet only 10 to 15% seek or enter treatment. And the question to me was, what is keeping the other 85% from treatment? You don't see that with any other condition, right? it's not true that 85 to 90% of diabetics don't go look for treatment.
Right. Well, alcoholism's the only disease that people will never admit they have, right?
Yeah, but I don't. So I think that's us blaming the addicts a little bit. I think when 85% of people don't look for the solution, we need to look at ourselves a little bit. And the question for me then was, what was going on? I looked at it. Some of the basic barriers you can always think of were coming up, like cost, logistics. Getting help for addiction is a hard thing. You've got to give up quite a bit of what you've got going on in life, et cetera. And then the shame and stigma that I'm sure we'll talk about. I love that you're one of the entry lines into the show is end the stigma. And that's why I'm happy we're having this conversation. But there was this one little piece, one little barrier to people getting into treatment that caught my eye, and it was enjoyed using too much to stop. And when I was giving the talk at UCLA presenting the results of the research, one of the postdocs that I worked with said, well, aren't those people not motivated for treatment? Why are we including them as part of the package? And I said, that's kind of a weird thing to say for a study where the only way they got to us was because they were looking for treatment. They had to fill out a baseline assessment, a week follow-up, a month follow-up, and a 6-month follow-up. And to me, I can't really look for much more motivated people than people who will keep coming back over and over to answer
Right, so
questions.
they want help, but they don't necessarily want the entire menu.
Yeah.
Well, or I would say this, right?
They want
They don't
jail
want-
instead of drug court.
But that's not true. I think that's demeaning them a little bit. I think what they want is help. They want help
Right.
with the consequences, and they don't want the solution. And what I started talking about is the analogy of imagine if every single time somebody had an ankle pain or a foot pain or anything like that, and they went to any doctor, any physician in the United States and said, look, I've got this really horrible pain in my ankle. Whenever I walk, it hurts really bad. The doctor would say, well, let's schedule you in tomorrow for an amputation, and I'll just amputate below the knee, and you won't have ankle pain ever again. How many people do you think would really come to the doctor? My guess is about 10%.
Yeah, but
but a lot of people would say that the pain in the ankle, but that they keep banging it with a hammer, that the same doctor would say, hey, why don't you put down the hammer?
Sure, but the problem is we don't necessarily, it's not the hammer that we're asking to put down, because the hammer is...
Well, the hammer is the drink in this case.
Right.
We're
And,
saying stop drinking.
At some point, we're going to separate an alcoholic and a heavy drinker, maybe,
I love
Right.
it.
who can do both. So let's separate that. You, Jason, Dr. Giles, I don't think I ever called you Dr. Giles. But you like this cage questionnaire.
Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about, what I'm hearing you describe, Dr. Jaffee, is the 3 stages of alcoholism, right? Which are fun, and then fun with problems, and then finally problems. And so if people are coming in the middle stage before they've slid all the way down the hill, then, yeah, they want to hang on to the good times, and they still want to have a drink at New Year's Eve or their daughter's wedding. Or I said that. I said, I just want to hang on to having a drink at my daughter's wedding. But really, the negotiation is whether or not you can actually handle it. And that's what you're talking about, Pat,
Right.
which is, so there's this questionnaire that I wish more primary care doctors, I wish when you come in with ankle pain, they would ask this question because it's so common. So your statistics, I think, are accurate, which are there's a big problem with drinking and drug use in the country, and hardly anyone comes in for help. And I agree. Part of it is that we don't want the stigma, or it's too expensive, or I can't take off work, or it's still fun. But part of it is you don't know that you've got the problem necessarily. It's not clear. And so Pat's referring to the CAGE questionnaire, which stands for CAGE, or cut down, annoyed, guilty, and eye-opener. And so the questions that the primary care docs and really any sort of medical patient interface or psychologist, if you ask those questions, hey, have you tried to cut down on your drinking? Well, it turns out that's a pretty sensitive question by itself. If you have tried to cut down on your drinking, then, who are you kidding? You've probably got a problem if you're trying to cut down. And then if you're annoyed when people say, hey, Pat, 14 bottles of wine might be too many. Why don't you cut back to 10?
It actually was.
Yeah. Feel guilty about drinking.
I think if we're going to put a limit, a couple of 10 drinks.
Yeah.
I had more than I should. And then the one that most people don't want to talk about is the eye opener. So I needed to get a drink in the morning or a pill or something to get going.
But we're talking about 2 different things too. But the part of the alcoholism thing is, and that is the ism part too, where there's stuff going on in your life and you use alcohol as the medicine to get you well. And by the way, it works for
Right.
most people. You
Right.
have a drink and you feel better. But Dr. Jaffee, you say what to that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we're opening the conversation a little bit. So the DSM-5 essentially agrees with Dr. Giles here and has moved.
Can we say
alcoholism-
Jason and Addie?
Yeah.
Dr.
Friends.
Jason. How about Dr. Jason? We'll split
How
the
about Dr.
difference.
J?
Dr.
Dr. J. That's actually my anyway. LA Dr. J is my Twitter handle. So the DSM-5 has just opened up our definition of alcoholism or addiction or any substance use disorder into having 3 categories, right? So you can have no problem. That's not even included in here. There's a low, moderate, and severe version of it. The problem with what we've done to date is that little discussion that we were just having, most people who refer to treatment don't have. And so they don't recognize the difference between somebody with a drinking problem and somebody who's a hardcore alcoholic. And the issue is, though, we don't have a biological test for this. So there's the CAGE, there's the audit, there's the assist. We use the Michigan Short assessment.
MAST.
The MAST, this MAST. And there are a couple different tools that you can use. And, you asked what we do, and let me just tell you, we do 2.5 days of assessments on them. And then after 2.5 days, including a QEEG brain scan and a number of other assessments, we have a conversation with them. We say, look,
the guy says, Uncle, 2.5 days of tests. I give up. I'm not going to drink.
Welcome back to the Alphabet Soup Show. We'll have as many letters as we can. But first, let's get jumping. 800-222-5222 is our number. KLEANradio.com. Our Twitter is @KLEANradio. Or you can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Ustream, just about everywhere. And this network is growing, and we have some big plans for 2015, and it's going to be big, it's going to be wide. What about the person coming into the holidays, guys, who they're worried? It's the holidays, they're around, there's going to be drinks all over the place. One could be an alcoholic and wants to drink again. One could be a moderate drinker, but maybe start drinking too much. Is there advice you can give to those people?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let Jason go first.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's hardly a holiday gathering unless there's some sort of family conflict. And there's also this sense of it's what Dr. Jaffee was referring to, which is it was still fun. We fondly remember the good times, and that's the hook. That's what nobody who's had problems, got sober, cleaned their lives up, is thinking, I want to get a shotgun pointed at my face again. No one has a drink with that in mind. They have a drink for ease and comfort and good times. And that's what we associate the holidays with, that time of family and getting together and bygones and the new year and resolutions and I'll fix this later. And that's a bear trap. That's a punji pit for the alcoholic because of all the emotional connections to how much fun it used to be.
Right, and I'm trying to get a handle on what I don't want to confuse people because we have two different opinions here. But one size does not fit all, basically, right?
Yeah, and I really hope we don't get to a place where by offering two opinions we confuse people. I mean, I really hope that we can move.
I never said that. I said I don't want to confuse people.
No, absolutely. And that's why I'm happy that I'm here, because I think for most people that I have these conversations with, it's as if we're looking for the right answer. And the bottom line is there are probably a multitude of answers. I'm not by any means an old guy in this field, but it's not like for any question that I've looked at within academia, I end up finding a single solution, hardly ever, that actually explains the entire situation. And so I think you're right. It's not that what we offer, other than offering people a lower threshold to entering treatment, even if they're not ready to give things up, they go through the heavy assessments, they go through extensive individual and group therapy, et cetera, and we lower the threshold. Even if that's all we do, I think we do a service. But at the end, my hope is that as a treatment industry, we end up getting a lot better at figuring out who fits what sort of treatment.
Is that the easy way out, though?
I don't think what we do is an easy way out. I mean, seriously, if you look at a schedule that people go through with us, that's far from easy. And we talked about this a little bit before the show. A good number, I would say about 30 to 40% of the people who come to us looking for moderation end up finding a couple of months into the experiment that this is not for them.
Reminds me of a story. When I was fortunate enough to go to a treatment center that specialized in the large egoed population known as doctors. We had some lawyers in there too, and
maybe some broadcasters in there too.
Maybe a couple of broadcasters. And we had one union forklift operator. But anyhow, we were there for 90 days. That was, by then, the data had shown that we all needed to be there for at least 3 months, and all of our licensing boards wanted us there for that long. And every so often, there's a guy who just would not commit to 90 days, and he would come in for the quote-unquote evaluation. He was only there for 3 days, which was a source of hilarity for us because, we know what the result of that 3-day evaluation is. And that's kind of what I'm getting at is, most people who can answer the C question of the CAGE questionnaire, they know there's a problem. They know that they should stop. They don't know I think, the big barrier, is they don't know what's on the other side. They don't know how good it can be.
But here's what I love about
Dr. Jaffee, have you ever said to somebody you're an alcoholic, you don't belong in this program?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Not only have we said that to people at the outset, as soon as they come into us, we've said that to people in the middle. And I think that's an important conversation, because that little guy who showed up only for the 3-day assessment got something out of there and stayed for 90 days. So nobody had to sell him on the 90 days. All we have to do is get them in. And to me, I was just presenting on this in D.C. I think part of our job as an industry has to stop being only focused on what is the right treatment and how do we get more people into treatment. Has to come into that conversation, because if we don't do a better job, we could magically come up with a treatment solution that is 100% effective for everybody who gets it. But if only 10% of the people we're trying to treat come into it, we're still screwed.
Speaking of treatment, Amy from Vancouver, you're on the air. How are you? It's Pat O'Brien.
Hi. I wrote it down tonight, Pat, so that I wouldn't be bumbling over my words. So
That's all right. We all do that.
Years ago, and I'm not sure how long ago it was, but there used to be a show called Scared Straight.
Yep.
I remember that show, Rahway Prison in New Jersey, yeah.
Right.
In fact, I had a show, we shared Emmys that year. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things I was wondering is, they use that show to change gang members, criminal youth, how to, what it was like to be out in this field where, people die and get murdered. Is there a in a treatment center anywhere, has anybody ever volunteered to be a guinea pig, so to speak, and videotape their drug problem?
Okay. Well, they tried that with, what was it called?
Intervention. I mean, they were following people around.
Intervention. The only way to actually see it is to go to recovery meetings or places where you hear the stories and not see movies about the stories. Because you hear horrific stories about what alcohol and drugs have done to people, how their lives have been destroyed. And, if you listen to those, you might be able to say, well, I think that's the road I'm going down. Or, as Dr. Jaffee would say, maybe it's not the road I'm going down. Maybe there's a left turn somewhere here.
Well, or, how many clients...
Am I right?
How many clients
Well, Amy, if there were something that I could give, it's not just the visual of seeing what life looks like. If I could, I'd put you on the person, contemplating a life of drugs ahead of them, on a magic carpet where they could feel what it feels like at the end, where they could feel that universe contracting around them and the loneliness, and that would scare a lot of people straight, I think.
Well, I think the other thing is, I point out in my book, which is called "I'll Be Back Right After This." Still, by the way, I had a book signed today at Book Soup, signed a bunch of books. But I compare myself to Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. That I finally realized that I could go home and I didn't have to do all this suffering. Dr. Adi Jaffee is with us. Dr. Jason Giles is with us. I'm Pat O'Brien. We'll be back after the break with the ever so famous Buddy Totten and what you guys are thinking out there. Stay with us.
Are you addicted to drugs or alcohol but unable to commit to an inpatient rehab stay? Introducing KLEAN Treatment Center's Outpatient Treatment. This drug and alcohol treatment program is designed specifically for the working professional. Don't let your commitments of running a business, taking care of a child, or maintaining your college classes get in the way of your recovery from addiction. With daytime, evening, or individualized programs, KLEAN's Outpatient Treatment will fit your life. Call now for a free screening. Professional guidance is standing by.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pat O'Brien. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for joining the KLEAN Radio channel. Be sure to subscribe and get weekly episodes and clips. And comment, like or dislike, whatever. Be nice. We respond to everything.
Now back to Los Angeles. This is KLEAN Radio.
Welcome back. I'm Pat O'Brien. And we're here. We hope that you, if you're listening to the show, that you'll learn something today or tonight. It's a day somewhere, right? Australia. They're having a big deal in Australia right now, a big hostage situation. Right. But anyway, we hope you learn something and try to find some sort of ground or some sort of schematic for your own life. And that leads me kind of to Buddy Totten. Hello, Buddy. How are you?
Good. How are you, man?
I hate to put the word schematic with Buddy in the same sentence. But that's the way it's going to be.
Right.
Buddy, along with Sarah, helps us with our social media. What are they saying out there?
All right, so we have the Ask Pat section, and Ryan, Tammy, and Eric all have questions for you. I'll do Ryan first. Ryan is asking, Pat, I've been sober for 3 years, but my dad is a heavy drinker and refuses to get help. He'll be drunk for Christmas dinner for sure. Do you have any tips on keeping the peace with a mean drunk?
No. because every situation is different, I think. And I think a lot of people have family members who are mean when they get drunk. I was funny when I was drunk. I thought. As far as you knew. But I think, what do you guys think? I mean, I think you always try to have an open conversation with a member of the family. But they don't
that's
always
tricky,
wanna
though.
listen.
Yeah, of course. But, having an open conversation with the bottle is going to be difficult. So it's what we were talking about earlier about all the emotional landmines around Christmas. And I think, what's the fellow's name again?
Ryan.
Ryan. What I would say to Ryan is that the most important thing is that Ryan stays sober this Christmas, no matter what happens with his dad. So drinking at somebody, or if you can't beat him, join him, or giving up and throwing in the towel is, don't do that, because you never know what comes down the road. Dad may be just about to see the light and turn around, or he may not. But it sounds like Ryan's got something valuable he can hold on to.
Is there any harm reduction there on Christmas Day?
Well, one of the first things, I want to look for harm reduction. This guy's sober for 3 years. I say, good for you and keep going.
Right.
But what I would say
Dad.
is this. What I tell everybody is, look, I'm more concerned with Ryan because he's the one who's coming in. I would say if you can have somebody who's with you who can help kind of buffer any negative conversations that are going on. And the second one that I think is really important, a lot of people forget this is even possible during the holidays, is have a plan B, right? If things get so bad in the interaction that you're with that you are afraid for your own sobriety, you're afraid for your own recovery, have a plan of somewhere else to go. Because if you don't have one, you're going to find yourself stuck and you're going to end up in a situation that could be really terrible.
But ignoring it's not the right reason, right?
No, pretending like it's not happening. But by the same token, it sounds like, we're trying to read a lot into this comment, but our question. It sounds like confronting it and sorting Dad out this holiday season is probably not going to happen either.
It might be a little late for that, too. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay, Tammy is asking, Pat, when did you first realize you had a problem with drugs and alcohol, and how did you first get help?
Are you saying I have a problem? My alcoholism didn't really kick in, I think, until my mid-50s. I was a drinker, and I got by. I worked every day. I was on TV every day. I never drank at work. I think, though, towards the end, it just got worse and worse and worse, and I couldn't function when I got home without having a drink. And then I started to realize, maybe there's something wrong here. So I went to rehab. Then I relapsed. I still didn't realize. Went to another rehab. Relapsed. Still didn't realize. Went to another rehab. Man, I spent a lot of money on rehab, didn't I? You had this stuff back.
You don't come here to hunt. Yeah.
But I'm not saying rehabs don't work. They didn't work for me because I wasn't ready, and that's the main thing with me, right, Jason?
That's it.
I just wasn't ready, and get into a program of recovery somehow, and hopefully you're ready. Next one.
Okay, Eric, this is Eric's question. Hi, Pat. I have 2 years clean and I'm recently divorced. My wife and I have joint custody of our 11-year-old girl. From what my daughter says, it sounds like my ex is drinking and using again. What should I do?
Don't put the kid in the middle, for one thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you never, in any situation that involves divorce, I would never put the kid to make them a daughter, did you say?
Yes.
Make her a spy or a tattletale or whatever. It's an adult problem. But try to keep the kid out of there as much as possible.
I mean, that's really, really tough. That's a very tough spot. And I'm sorry for him and for her and for the mom, his ex, because it's all about these, keeping secrets, and the children wind up being the parents in those situations, right? Making sure mom is safe and gets tucked into bed, and that's really
awful.
Really tough. I mean, it's really tough.
If there's any kind of open line of communication, as Pat pointed out before, I would bring it up obviously when the woman is sober and really say, hey, I feel like we need to talk about this for the benefit of our child and make sure that we're taking care of the situation as best we can.
It's like any divorce. I mean, if you stay married and you're in a bad marriage, you probably should either get out of it, right, or have a conversation about it.
Right,
Don't lie your whole life.
And that's the key, which is that the truth is friendly. So whatever's actually happening, that's going to lead to mom getting help if that's what she needs, or the child being safe.
Right.
Well, sometimes the truth isn't friendly.
It doesn't feel friendly, and there'll be some pushback, that's for sure, on
you have to walk through
on
fire
both sides.
sometimes to get to that friendliness,
Buddy Totten, do you have a title now? Social Media Center?
We're still figuring it out, yeah.
Inquisitor.
All right.
Inquisitor.
Good job today, buddy.
All right,
Didn't
thank you,
blow
sir.
yourself up again. So you'll be back next week.
All right. See you next week.
Here we are on Clean Radio, and you can find us on cleanradio.com and YouTube and Ustream and at Clean Radio and pretty much everywhere. Guys, let's take a call from Amy in Portland, who's got a sobering story. Amy, how are you?
I'm good. Good. How are you doing?
We're good.
Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I've never called into a radio show before, but I happen to be sitting in my attic, smoking my cigarette, drinking my wine, and listening to everybody talk and about sobering moments, and I've had plenty of them. About 5 years ago, I lost my fiance in front of me. He was hit by a car, and I was blessed enough to be there with him as he died and said his last words. And I was so thankful that he was not alone and he was with somebody that he loved. But over the years, might I say, I have been a single mother, a driven career woman, making lots and lots of money.
But you're an addict. But you're in your attic.
I became an addict to work.
No, but you said you're in your attic, right?
Oh, I'm in my attic, ATTIC. Yeah, and this is kind of my hangout place, and I just happened to turn on the radio, and sometimes I think that things happen for a reason, and I turn on my radio, and you're on there, and it just caught my ear.
You thought you were safe in your mom cave.
I thought I was safe in my little cave. Yeah, in my little cave. It's funny, I have a beautiful home, but I sit up here and I choose to hang out in my ugly old attic, and my ugly old attic kind of represents how I feel. And so I think as addicts and as people who have been traumatized, we need to remember the important thing is that oftentimes you have to deal with the addiction, but before you can deal with the addiction, you have to deal with the trauma that caused that addiction. I mean, I know that oftentimes addiction kind of, genes, and it runs in the family, but that's easily beaten. But when you have trauma on top of it, and then you have the genes, and you don't even have to have the genes. It kind of leads you in that direction.
All right, but we've all got answers for this. So, Amy, take it easy up there. Go on downstairs.
Okay,
go downstairs for a while. I used to hang out in my attic when I was a kid because it was part of my isolation. I didn't feel like I fit in or anything. But what do you do about this problem? I mean, you have trauma over addiction, over a horrifying, terrible predicament when her fiancé died in front of her, in her arms, I assume. And now you've got all the what we call the isms of alcoholism. You got all that inside you, and you're trying to medicate that.
Yeah. Well, I part of my background is in chronic pain management, and I used to say that if you drop pianos on two different people, one of them would be a chronic pain patient, one of them wouldn't.
I'd play it.
Yeah. And what Amy's talking about is that she's given to addiction or addictive behavior or overdrive, over-focus on, over-reliance on certain things or events or work to try and change the way she feels. And Amy, I'm sorry about the loss of your fiance. That's a horrible story, and that would affect anyone. But your retreat into your attic and killing yourself on the installment plan with cigarettes and alcohol is no way to go. That's no solution. And I think that's why you called in. It's like what Dr. Jaffee was saying about reaching out and asking for help.
Yeah, I think this is to me a perfect example of. The behavioral health field for a while has been in this ping pong game where first you got to treat the addiction, then you get to treat the trauma, etc. Amy, I don't think you have to pick one or the other. I think if you find the right practitioner, somebody can help you deal with both of the things, because obviously, this falls into that self-medication hypothesis and theory of drug and alcohol use. Everybody can understand why you would be drinking to overcome such a horrible situation that you were confronted with without any choice of your own, and regardless of genetics, as you pointed out. So what I would say is this. Anybody in a situation like this should look for help to deal with the emotional undertones that they feel like they have to drink because of. If there's also dependence on alcohol, that's going to become pretty apparent as you start being able to deal with the trauma better, and the alcohol just keeps rearing its ugly head.
And we do have a 24/7 hotline to Clean, 888-601-6040, 888-601-6040. Chris, you're on with all of us here, three doctors. Are you okay, Chris?
Yes, I am. I was trying to get somebody to take care of the baby. I'm in the car, and he's in the car with somebody now taking care of him, but I didn't want him screaming and yelling and going through what I'm getting ready to explain to you. So anyway, Yeah, long story short, my ex returns home with meth pipe in pocket, paraphernalia, a bunch of other stuff. Police called, CPS called, child endangerment called. Next day, she ends up going and playing victim at Gateway Services. They grant her a restraining order, even though there's 2 police reports where they tell her you have to leave for 24 hours. Leave the children here. They're in a safe place.
Right. What's the problem right now, Chris?
The problem is I'm finding a bunch of bias with women and with them taking the side of women, that there seems to be no advocacy groups that are for men, that center for men that are trying to do the right things by their kids that have been touched by addiction.
And you're sober, right?
I am clean for 6 years almost.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, I have a 1109 is my clean date.
All right, well, the world record's 24 hours. But
That's right.
But the courts seem to always favor the women. Why, I wonder?
Well, I think that's true, but that's changing. You know, it's changing because more and more there are men's groups on the rise. This is not you're not alone, right? There's growing realization that it's not always mother knows best. The other thing is, so congratulations on putting distance between yourself and drugs and alcohol. But you also have it sounds like an alcoholic or a drug addict in your life, and there are other groups for those of us who love and care for people with drug and alcohol problems. And usually I don't recommend those in the beginning of recovery because you don't want to make a mistake and think, well, my real problem is that my spouse drinks, so I can drink and I'll be all right. But it sounds like you've got a good handle on the fact that, alcohol equals pain for you. But the same way that you felt relief talking to other people who felt the way you did, and that's why they used and drank, that same relief is ahead of you when you connect with other people who are going through the same thing.
Right.
Now, Chris, I'm going to let you go. You need to get back to that baby. Thanks for calling. Merry Christmas, all right? Larry in Los Angeles. Larry, you're on with Pat and the doctors. Oh, I'm sorry. Hello, Larry.
Educate the general public on addiction, because I was having a lunch with a business associate the other day, and he played college football, and he was talking about his buddy who played college football and couldn't make it to the pros because, in his words, he couldn't put down the crack pipe. And he said it in sort of a derisive kind of way. And so, I'm just wondering, how much does the general public know, and how much can we teach them about what we're talking about?
Well, how many hours do you have? First of all, you're not going to be doing anything right if you got a crack pipe in your pocket.
No,
that's pure and simple right there. But Dr. Jaffee, how do it's our job kind of to educate the public, and it's just such a wide area here. And
sure. I teach a class on addiction at Cal State Long Beach, and I'm hoping to teach the same class at UCLA coming up this summer. But I think one of the first things research has shown us is that being honest about the associated consequences, being real about the prevalence of the substance use, et cetera, in the population is one of the best things we can do. And so the whole, we talked about the Just Say No campaign, your brain, our drugs, and things like that. I think that oversimplification tends to get the people who are not at risk to kind of go along with the flow, but the people who are at risk, we've been shown over and over, they don't buy into that stuff. And so for those people especially, I think it's important for us to get in front of the message and not tell college kids that they shouldn't drink, because 90% of them drink. So instead, explain to them what is a binge drinking episode and how do you make sure that you don't hit that mark. Because I'll tell you, for most kids in college, the thing in high school, right, the later parts of high school, the things they have to worry about around drinking and drug use don't have anything to do with alcoholism and drug addiction. They have to do with unwanted pregnancies, with rape, with DUIs, with fights and other violent occurrences. That's where they suffer the most consequences. And if we keep focusing on the end-all, be-all negative consequence, spending the rest of your life chasing a high, we're looking at one little part of the picture. And so we need to educate these kids about all the other consequences that they really need to be aware of.
See, I think that's a big part of the picture, are the consequences. I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's what either gets them sober or keeps them sober.
Well, you can't tell when you start out in the same way you don't plan to wind up with the sheriff's department breaking down your door. kids are looking for fun and relief, and drugs and alcohol have been part of human culture since there has been human culture. So we're foolish to pretend like any kind of let's just eliminate. We tried prohibition, right?
So you blame Herod?
That didn't work.
That
Yeah, right. That's right. Helen is the source of the problem, and so when you say to kids or anyone else, hey, you just never use, it sounds like you're speaking a foreign language, because no one's signing up for the misery and pain. They're coming for the relief. And what I like to say to people is, if you're gonna break into the museum and steal a priceless work of art, which in this case is your life, right, your quality of life, what's the first thing you would do if you were a ace cat burglar? Is you'd turn off the alarm. And so that's what the chemicals do when you take them in. This poor fellow that you talked about, Larry, the fellow with the aborted football career, he didn't plan to give up on life. He didn't plan to be miserable. It's that the substances that we take to change the way we feel and think, well, surprise, they've now changed the way you feel and think, which is, I think I'll have another. So the problem with, and I agree with you, Dr. Jaffee, I used to educate physicians about this problem, and I was trying to talk to them about when they had it. Hey, listen, about 3 of you guys in the room are going to have a problem eventually, maybe later this year, and here's what to look for, and here's how to get help. And I realized that those people can't hear what I'm talking about, and that I'm really talking to the other 97 in the room. When you spot this strange behavior, here's what you should do.
I spent my whole life doing sports, and the thing about steroids, for example, is that they work.
Exactly.
And I don't suggest anybody take them, but I mean, that's why we have a steroid problem, is because they work. A drink, if you're depressed or something, seems to work.
If you want to change the way you feel, there are few things that work quicker.
Well, they do work, right? They work for modulating your emotional response to things. And Jason pointed out something great, which is drugs are known over time to actually reduce your sensitivity to punishment. So we see this in animal models, and we see this in human models of addiction. And so as part of the activity of taking the substance, you're making yourself less and less sensitive to consequences, of what it seems like. But I think what we're getting at a little bit right now is there's this natural proclivity for us as humans to want to change the way we feel. Jason was reading a book when I came in. We read books, we go to movies, we take drugs, we run, we do all these different things to modulate the way we feel. I think we have to allow for the complexity of the discussion a little bit and be able to explain to people, look, if what you're looking for is a way to change the way you feel, here are a bunch of different things you can pay attention to. FYI, these 3, 4, 5 options on the menu can also lead to these other negative consequences. The shame and stigma that we put in place, even though we don't mean to with these messages, and there are still dry campuses and in the
Sure.
U.S. and things like that, by adjusting the message a little bit to include for the fact that, yes, kids are more impulsive, but they're also intelligent, we might be able to change to the point where at least they're listening to us instead of learning how to drink and use drugs from other 14, 15, and 16-year-olds.
I love that answer, because we talked early, and one of the reasons we're on the air every week here on KLEAN Radio is my goal is to end the stigma. I think the word alcoholism is a horrible thing.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people just don't want to be called an alcoholic. When I went down, the Twitter, everything, he's a drunk, he's an alcoholic. It was embarrassing for me, but, I don't care now. Turned out I made money on it, to be honest with you. And I'm sober. But, but the stigma of he's a drunk, he's an alcoholic, instead of he's a person in recovery or he's trying to get help. How do we change that?
I have an article on Psychology Today that I think hits that nail right on the head. So hopefully I can talk about this group because I'm no longer a member of it, so it makes it easier for me. But, the AA, the alcoholics is part of is everybody understands why that's there, but Anonymous has become a thing that we now consider as protecting the institution. When Alcoholics Anonymous started in the mid-30s, part of the main reasons was if you were going to have a meeting in town with all the alcoholics in it, you needed to protect that meeting because those people had hurt others, they had stolen from them, etc., and it was unsafe for them necessarily to continuously meet in a room. I think anonymity in recovery, not only around AA and other 12-step programs, but in general, the anonymity of people who have recovered or are in recovery from drug, alcohol, sex addictions, etc., really hurts the picture of what a recovering individual looks like because we don't get to see those. When celebrities like you, Pat, when people fall flat on their face, there's media coverage all over the place. when you get better, you've got to go out and scream from the top of a mountain for anybody to even pay attention.
And I say all the time, you can Google all my problems, but you can't Google my recovery.
Yeah.
And you can Google voice, all that crap.
It's part of why physicians go underground also, because even if you're, you used to have this problem, it's very difficult to come out and talk about it because people naturally wonder, well, what's going on now, and how do we know you're safe? And
by the way, based on the Sony hacking, my problem was kind of a drop in the water, wasn't it?
I was going to become a physician. I came from a family of physicians, and one of the main concerns I had was because I was going back to school. I said, I don't know that I will ever pass the board. I don't know that they'll ever let me practice because of what happened. And in reality, the reason you were asking before, you called me a psychologist, I'm a behavioral neuroscientist. The reason I'm not a psychologist was the number of hurdles they put in front of me to become a psychologist, even 12 years after my addiction problem, were so enormous that I said, I can help this problem without being the individual practitioner. I can do a good job in that way. But a lot of people are confronted with the shame, stigma, and lack of opportunity that comes from having dealt with this problem, even 15, 20, 30 years going.
Although a good program of recovery is hard to beat. I mean, if you can find a program that you like, and you spoke of one which we don't like to talk about a lot because it's anonymous, but if you can follow that program and get rid of the stigma, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, that's the trick, is to replace the automatic repetitive behaviors that you used to engage in that cause trouble with different ones that produce a good, nice, happy life. And there's lots of them. There's lots of them around. I think the keys are to maintaining this abstinence or recovery or happy life, whether that takes the form of abstinence or not, is maintenance. It's about Pat and I've been friends for a long time. It's about keeping those relationships current and staying open to correction.
I want to backtrack even for a second, though. Let's say, we're talking about substance use and addiction, but even just behavioral health, mental health in general, is so shamed and stigmatized. And, it's one of those things where we don't get to talk openly about our mental handicap in the way that, if you injured your foot, you injured your leg, you can call your boss and say, I'm really not up to the task. I can't come into work today. You can't call in and say, I'm having a panic attack.
Right.
And I think we need to move to this place where we are much more open to talk about what's going on in our brain, because guess what? Our brain is a physical part of our body like the rest of it, and that produces so much of this emotional turmoil that we talk about, and we need to get more comfortable with it, because as we get more comfortable with it, it'll stop being the scoop.
And by the way, it is a disease. Alcoholism.
Well, the reason the stigma persists is that in one form or another, everybody has it. And so if I associate with alcoholics, then pretty soon you're going to start saying, hey, wait a minute. I noticed that the way you act and this behavior is a little troubling.
Well, the number everybody looks for is more.
Right.
And we're 10 days away from Christmas. So before we go, we got a couple minutes left from both of you. Let's say you're an active alcoholic. Well, that's wrong. Let's say you're an alcoholic.
in your attic.
Let's say you're an alcoholic. Who wants to take that one? What do you do the next 10 days to stay sober? Jason?
What do you do the next 10 days to stay sober?
During the holidays, yeah.
Yeah, don't drink. Number one, no matter how you explain it to yourself that I'm going to just have one, or I'm going to enjoy myself, or this won't hurt. Just don't do it. Just don't take that first drink, because the first drink changes the way you feel, and it's going to say, let's have another drink.
And if you're...
Am I only answering this to severe alcoholics?
No, you answer it from somebody who just drinks too much.
Okay, so we get this from a lot of people who come in the low, moderate, and they know the holidays are going to be rough. Uncle Joey is going to be there, and he always gives them a glass of scotch as soon as they come in. These are some of the tips that no 14-year-old teaches you. Always eat before you go to an event, and never pre-party. If you're pre-partying before you even go to the event, that's a pretty big sign of a problem already. The other thing is alternate drinks. Drinks are constantly being served at these things. Alternate alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks. And another one of the things that I teach all my students in class, it takes the body between an hour to an hour and a half to process a single alcoholic drink. I want people to keep that in mind as they're pacing themselves, because if you're drinking a drink every 30 minutes, your blood alcohol concentration is going up and up and up. And like every good drug addict, alcoholic, or drug user will tell you, you're going to keep chasing that peak. And once it starts dropping, you get tired, you want to leave the party, you're annoyed, etc. So people end up getting more and more drunk because they're not pacing themselves.
And once again, those rules do not apply to an alcoholic.
Right. If you're
an alcoholic, either figure out how to go to the party and not drink, or don't go to the party.
Yeah, I look at it like this: if you make a mistake, and
the party's over if you're an alcoholic.
Yeah, that's right. If you make a mistake, if you don't know if you're an alcoholic or not, and you listen to this advice and you decide not to drink Nothing bad's going to happen to you. If you decide that you are an alcoholic and you're not going to drink, right? But if you're not sure, the safest bet, the safest choice, since nobody's born alcohol deficient, is just to skip it.
Absolutely. I completely agree with Jason. The safest approach is to not drink at all.
When are we ever going to come to a decision or a solution to all this? There's so many. I mean, we spent an hour here and didn't even touch it really because there's so many branches on this tree of recovery that what should people do? I mean,
I'll do the same here as I do with our clients. I don't think we're ever going to find a solution. I think what we're going to do is get better and better at knowing who to treat in what way at what time.
I think it's just a question of time, and we're going to figure it out. It's a question of genetics and environment and exposure, and we're going to see who's at risk, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Dr. J and Dr. J, thank you both for being here. And Jason will be back with us next week. Our clean number 24/7 is 888-601-6040, 888-601-6040, 24/7. You can ask for help, get help, call, and somebody will talk to you. I was at the John Lennon exhibit this week, and I'm wearing a John Lennon T-shirt, who famously said, life is something that happens to you while you're making other plans. Hopefully you'll make the right plans this holiday and the rest of your life. We'll see you next week.
Are you addicted to drugs or alcohol, but unable to commit to an inpatient rehab stay? Introducing KLEAN Treatment Center's Outpatient Treatment. This drug and alcohol treatment program is designed specifically for the working professional. Don't let your commitments of running a business, taking care of a child, or maintaining your college classes get in the way of your recovery from addiction. With daytime, evening, or individualized programs, KLEAN's Outpatient Treatment will fit your life. Call now for a free screening. Professional guidance is standing by.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pat O'Brien. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for joining the KLEAN Radio channel. Be sure to subscribe and get weekly episodes and clips. And comment, like or dislike, whatever. Be nice. We respond to everything.